As much as we all want the latest products, typically out of excitement and curiosity, I think that we can all agree that over the years of playing, we've all had one pair of boots that you can't get anymore that were just your all-time favorites. And recently it's become a bit of a trend for pro footballers, either in training or in matches, to go back and wear their old favorites. Except for this guy, he's not changing. So with that in mind, here are the top 5 football boots that everybody wants back. These picks being based on popular opinions, because if they were my picks, then I'd be picking things like the Adidas Predator Instinct SL, which is a football boot that you probably didn't even know existed. If you grew up in the glory days of the Adidas Predator series, then I think it'd be a pretty safe bet to say that your all-time favorite is probably an older Predator model. And while everyone has their own pick, I think the popular opinion, at least what I think most people deem to be the best Predator model of all time, I know it's my personal favorite, it's the Adidas Predator Mania, which is a classic for so many different reasons. Not only is it an incredible looking pair of football boots with so many intricate details, it's legitimately one of the best performing Predators Adidas has ever made. And this is a demand that Adidas has clearly recognized is out there, and I'm sure a lot of you guys are aware of this, but they recently put out a remake of the Adidas Predator Mania with an upper that is as close to the OG as we could have possibly hoped for. Of course, it features the tooling from the existing modern Predator, which is nothing like the Pred used to be, but it's still a great product. The downside was, of course, that it was $350 and limited edition and sold out now, so if you wanted them, too bad. Is it possible that Adidas will make more Predator Mania remakes in the future? I would actually say that it's very likely, but as I've been saying for the last year and a half, I think it'd be a great idea for the Adidas brand to maintain the modern Predator series, but then do a classic series as well, similar to what Nike has with the Premier, where it's a lower price point, simple boot, leather upper, rubber striking elements, maybe even a fold over flap tongue for the old school Pred heads, and I think they'd be very, very happy and sell a ton of boots. And I guess just out of curiosity, what's your favorite Predator of all time? Now, all of the boots that I've picked to put on this list are a minimum of 5 years old, except for one, and that's because there is one boot that Nike released in 2017 that people still ask me about to this day, where they can buy them, if they're gonna come out with more, and of course I'm talking about this guy right here, the Nike Mercurial Vapor Flyknit Ultra, which was a limited edition release that came out in 4 different colorways, all of which sold out pretty much instantly. And while this isn't officially part of the Mercurial lineage, it is arguably the best Mercurial model Nike has ever made. Up until this point, it was pretty normal for Nike to put out a limited edition concept boot every once in a while. The Nike GS is a great example of this. It was a very cool looking boot with a super interesting concept, but I think anyone that actually had a pair of them realized that it was The Flyknit Ultra was a little bit different though, in that it was based on the, at the time, Superfly 5 and Vapor 11 sole plate and stud pattern, but featured a Flyknit upper, which was not unlike what we had on the Superfly 5 at the time, but just 10 times better, and arguably even better than any Flyknit upper we've seen on a Mercurial to date. I don't think it's quite as responsive or as locked in as what we have now with the Vapor 13 and Superfly 7, but the touch and comfort that you get from the Flyknit Ultra really is unlike any other football boot that has come out before it or since. It has this really interesting kind of like sandpaper grippiness to the speed rib texturing that you have running across the entire upper, but it's still thin, it has that barefoot sensation, and it's also extremely flexible. I think it's maybe a little bit lacking in the responsiveness and structures category when it comes to high-end Mercurials, but as a whole, it definitely gets the job done. It feels incredible, and again, what makes this boot special is the experience on offer, unlike anything else we've ever had. Will Nike release them again? Probably not. Could we get a Flyknit Ultra 2? Maybe. Just like the Predators, the F50, specifically the F50 Adizero series from Adidas, had a very popular run between 2010 and 2015. I would say 2011 being the peak of its popularity, and then 2015 being the point where the popularity had died off so much that Adidas decided to kill the F50 line entirely. A sad day. Anyways, fans of the F50 Adizero all have their personal favorite of the 5, 6, 7 generations that they released over that 5-year span. But I think that there is one in particular that people who wore all of them tend to agree was the best, and that was the 2014 F50 Adizero from Adidas, which I still think to this very day is the best speed boot the brand has ever made. The 2014 F50 being the second last version of the F50 Adizero, with the 2015 being an interesting variation on this, but ultimately worse and not as light, which was a signature element of the F50 Adizero. These feel pretty much weightless in hand as well as on feet, but I think what made this boot special was the synthetic upper being made out of hybrid touch, which was a very common material across the entire Adidas brand at that time. For the F50 specifically, it was very thin, giving you that barefoot touch, but also really soft and flexible. It really had the synthetic quality of a Mercurial, which we had never really seen from the Adidas brand up until this point. I think the F50 series was widely known for being a lightweight boot that was also available in a leather upper variation, and up until this point, I think having the leather version of the F50 was the way to go, and that's simply because the synthetic offerings, while not bad, it just was very plasticky and not as good as the synthetic that you could get from their main competitors in the Nike Mercurial series. This hybrid touch was definitely a game changer though, in that the touch was great, the comfort was phenomenal, the responsiveness and overall performance of the boot was pretty much unlike anything else. And even though this still utilizes pretty much the same layout that we still see to this day from the Adidas brand, it was a major change up in comparison to all past F50 models, and legitimately the best traction an F50 boot has ever had. Adidas seems to like remaking boots these days. We've even seen a remake of the F50.6 Tune-It, which was a very weird choice, but if they're going to remake more F50 models, please do the 2014 F50, please. I asked nicely. If you're going to talk about popular football boots that everybody wants back, you have to talk about Mercurials. Not only is it still to this date the most popular series of football boots on the market, it is the one series that still exists that has such a loyal following. People wear Mercurials and refuse to wear anything else for good reason, because nothing really feels quite like a Mercurial. Now, there is an extensive history of great Mercurials, and I think that maybe some of the really early ones get a little bit more credit than they deserve in terms of how good they are by today's standards. Important at the time, not that great now. I'm looking at the Vapor 3, Vapor 4, and pretty much Superfly 1, 2, and 3 as well. None of those are all that great in my opinion, but there is one that I think is deserving of some kind of a comeback, and I'm sure everybody misses. It is the Nike Mercurial Vapor 8 from 2012. What makes the Vapor 8 so special is its combination of technology, aggressiveness, and just general purity. I think you could argue that every Mercurial that came after this had some kind of overcomplicated aspect about it. I know the Vapor 9 was kind of just a variation of this, so maybe that one doesn't count, even though the golf ball dimple texturing I always thought was a little bit goofy. This boot just screams speed, and that to me is what the Mercurial series is all about. The Tajin synthetic upper found on this boot, which saw a couple different variations, this being a launch colorway that had this kind of peach fuzz texturing. We also got an artificial leather grain on some other colorways. Also the Vapor 8 being the first boot to introduce ACC technology on later colorways as well. Not as important, but still worth noting. This is a football boot that just felt fantastic from a touch standpoint. And I think if you're looking for a barefoot feel, this is arguably the best boot to do it ever. Granted, if you got stepped on, your feet were probably going to bleed, but it was worth it because the feel for the ball was just so pure. Also, unlike a lot of Mercurials that came before it, Nike got everything right from a fit and comfort standpoint, something that was always a major struggle of the Mercurial series leading up to the Vapor 8. It also had a glass fiber sole plate, which looked really, really cool, and an extremely aggressive stud pattern with minimal studs, even though this is an FG layout. Yes, the heel studs would break off pretty easily, but we could live with that. Nike, if you ever decide to make a football boot that's not a sock, something like this would be really nice. Number one on this list is a pair of football boots that has gone down in history as being the only one of its kind, and special for so many reasons, but also flawed in a lot of ways. But I think what's interesting about this boot is that its flaws are ultimately what made it so special. With that description, you might know what I'm already talking about. It is the Nike Hypervenom Phantom 1. Who knew that a football boot with an upper that had such a stupid name would go down in history as one of the greatest Nike football boots of all time? The Nike skin upper found on the Hypervenom Phantom 1 is really what defined this product. This mesh-based synthetic material with thin polyurethane fused over top was soft, flexible, and really had a leather-like quality to it. Not only was the boot super comfortable the second that you put them on your feet, but the material would stretch and mold to your feet almost like a leather boot would, even though it was a mesh base, which is something that we had never really seen before. It gave you somewhat of a barefoot feel, kind of like a Mercurial, but with comfort that was just 10 times better. Yes, the boot lacked structure when it came to the upper, meaning that it would tend to overstretch and feel a little bit sloppy. Definitely not the most responsive thing in the world, but the comfort and touch and just natural sensation that you would get on the ball while wearing a broken-in pair of Hypervenom Phantom 1s, like I said, unlike anything else we have ever seen from the Nike brand. The sole plate and stud pattern was also pretty good. I don't expect Nike to bring back the Hypervenom line, but if they're gonna do a remake, this one, please. Anyways, guys, that's it for this one. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, be sure to support it with a like. As always, feel free to share your own opinions down below in the comment section. I would love to hear which personal favorites of yours you would like to see back. If you aren't subscribed to the channel already, make sure you hit that subscribe button along with a little bell notification so you get notified when the next new video goes live. You can find all my social media info down below in the description as well. Other than that, guys, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.